Welcome to Venator Chronicles Podcast. I'm Ethan Taylor.
And I'm Dustin Jelly.
Our hope is to inspire new and old hunters alike.
We hope you can join us on this journey of lessons that we have, are, and will learn through the world of hunting.
A word about penetration testing. In today's internet world, one can find a myriad of information on arrow penetration and much misinformation. Real tissue are neither foam, wood, cardboard, metal, phone book, nor sand, and these tell one little about what results would be seen in real tissues. Some people still test with ballistics gel. This test medium was tried many times during the study's testing, but it failed to give results that corresponded to the real tissue outcomes. Ballistic gel is designed to simulate soft tissue cavitation by bullets. Bullets are little influenced by either the level of tissue fiber tonus or the degree of blood suffusion from the tissues during the projectile penetration, both significant factors affecting arrow penetration on soft tissues. Even when testing employs meat and bones, it is important to realize that testing on other than exceedingly fresh tissues will not yield results comparable to living tissues. In the study's testing, all shots on down animals are taken within 30 minutes of animal expiration. This is because tissue changes occur rapidly after death, providing penetration results that do not correlate with data from hunted animals. This is why the study employs dual databases, one containing test shots on freshly downed animals and one containing actual hunting kills. This provides a method for verifying the outcomes from down animal shots correlate accurately with shots taken during actual hunting situations. So why does fresh and living tissues yield different outcomes than non-fresh tissues? For many of the same reasons, ballistic gel gives different results for fresh and or living tissue. In fresh and living soft tissues, the muscle fibers retract as they are cut by the broad head. The retracting fibers cause the laceration to spread apart, opening the wound channel. This does not occur after either tissue flaccidity or rigor mortis sets in. The blood-suffused environment presented in fresh and living tissues provides a lubricating factor to a penetrating arrow, a factor not present in other test mediums. After death, even bones rapidly undergo a change which they affect how they flex and fracture as impact force is applied. Evaluate carefully how and under what conditions any arrow penetration testing you see was conducted. Good evening, Ethan.
Hey, Dustin.
How are you doing tonight?
Great. How are you?
Good. This is Venator Chronicles Podcast.
Thanks for joining us. Thanks for listening in.
And this is our Jocko Willenick introduction.
How many people do you think we lost?
I
captured
don't know.
in that. That was
Dude, trying to talk like Jocko. I was about ready to pass out, man.
I know we could hear.
Oof, that was fun though. That was fun.
No, that was good.
So if you don't know who Jocko Willenick is, go just Google Jocko Podcast.
Listen to the beginning of any of his podcasts, and you'll get what just happened.
Yes.
If you don't already know.
So,
and it's actually a pretty solid podcast. So there's that too.
There's a lot of content. It's a weighty podcast.
Yeah,
if you like 2-hour plus podcasts and having a guy recap a war book, a historical war book or novel.
He was a Navy SEAL, right?
Yep. Navy SEAL captain.
He's pretty hardcore.
Yeah, the guy's legit. But so we thought it'd be okay. I thought it would be fun. you kind of laughed at me when I brought up the idea,
but you're passionate about it, so anything you're passionate about, I'm on board. Let's do it.
Yeah. So I thought it would be fun tonight to talk about a little test or not a test, but basically a summary, an updated summary that came out by Dr. Ed Ashby on what he calls the 12 factors of arrow penetration.
Yeah.
And
in my defense, I did actually read this and found it very interesting. I was like, how is it going to go in a podcast? I don't know. So let's just go for it.
It's probably longer than anything you've ever read being from Superior.
Honestly, 9 pages, pretty close.
There's some big words in there too.
Yeah, there are. Yeah.
Like suffusion.
Yeah, exactly. I'm proud of you for getting those out.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
I was homeschooled.
Yeah, me too, mostly. Dude, all right. So there's, 12 different factors?
Yeah, so 12 factors, and I thought it'd be, hey, this is fun. I actually really enjoyed it. So some background real quick. If you have not heard of Dr. Ed Ashby, go Google his name or reach out. We'll send you a link to kind of his bio. From what I remember, right, and the guy was part of the original study being done in Africa in the 80s, and when they were trying to figure out, is it ethical to be able to take, ethical and doable to take large African game with bows. And so he was part of the study that went over, and they conducted just numerous studies on, dead and living animals and with bows and various arrow setups. And they found just a crap ton of information that was super helpful. And today is still kind of a very pivotal point in the archery industry. And he kind of provided this last month an updated summary of a lot of those findings. And if you want to read, go to grizzlystick.com. They've got a link to every one of his studies.
We'll throw that in our link tree, actually, in our bio, too.
There you go.
And then people can just go to Facebook, and you can find our link on there or on Instagram, and they'll be able to check that out.
Yeah, and then if you like totally geeking out over scientific studies done on shooting animals, this is right up your alley. It's deep.
Yeah, and the thing is like I've never looked into anything besides.
Had you even heard of Ed Ashby till I sent you the link?
No, I had not. And what's cool for me, coming from my part of it, is there's probably a lot of people out there, I would guess, who it's like you see the surface level advertisement stuff, and you're basing your decisions off of that because you're not going deep into what does it take? Is it, and then this being the overall question is it ethical? And when you read the first couple paragraphs about this and the thousands and thousands and thousands of animals killed, and we're talking
he says here, they got over 1,700 buffalo, Cape and Asian, 96 elephants, several hippos, countless bison, elk, moose, bear, elephant, kudu, sable, yada yada yada,
and compounds, longbows, recurves, and crossbows. And so for me, when I started reading this, not having a ton of background, and the thing that I run into a lot when I'm just doing the surface level, looking at different broadheads, is to me it seems like anecdotal evidence. I remember listening to one guy about his specific broadhead that was newer, and it was just
it was the best.
Well, it wasn't just the best. It was also. I'm gonna have to move this out. Man. Sorry, I'm gonna have to move that out of my way.
Mic fail.
It's really bothering me. But the thing that was really, really interesting to me is that when that guy was talking about his broadheads, he was just I shot an animal here with this other broadhead, then I made mine, shot it in the exact same place, and then it was killed. So I was like, that doesn't mean anything to me. That doesn't buy my trust at all.
Yeah.
And so when I started reading the beginning of this paper, I was like, oh my goodness, there's actually a ton of actual really hardcore applicable stuff here that I was like, all right, I'm tuned in, because I wasn't expecting to read all 9 pages. And then when I started going and reading the foreword or whatever you want to call it here, that to me was okay, I'm interested in what this is. Because at a certain point when we're talking about people shooting animals, it does go from anecdotal to pretty solid stuff.
Yep.
And so that's where I was like, all right, this is worth my time.
Yeah.
So it ended up being worthwhile.
Yeah, so we're going to kind of walk through what Dr. Ed Ashby describes as the 12 penetration enhancing factors. And he's kind of got three things right here that I really like. He says the goal of every bow hunter should be to achieve the most penetration possible on an animal with the intent of full pass-through, and then goes through and talks about how the Royal College of Veterinary Science concluded that pass-through shot is more lethal than having an arrow remain in the animal. Basically, better blood loss. Which
was news to me. And as far as I wasn't for or against, a general thought, I was like, yeah, pass-through, but a lot of people
call that uneducated.
Well, it's true. And then also, what I had also heard is the arrow's in there and it's just cutting it up.
Yeah, just cutting it up.
It's well, that's good and dandy unless you can't find it.
Yeah, because then he goes on to say an arrow shaft remaining in the wound channel applies pressure on the tissues, retarding blood loss. So basically, less blood loss. So it ends with, for complete pass-through shots, anecdotal evidence from the hunted animal kills also indicate a significant reduction in an animal's level of alarm at the hit, often showing little or no awareness that they had been shot. That was that was interesting.
Oh my gosh, you're so uneducated.
I'm very uneducated.
Sure. No, but it was cool because like as soon as I read that part of it, I was like, started like thinking about all the pass-throughs I've seen on videos or whatever,
heard.
And I'm like, oh, it's like boom, boom, it's so instantaneous that it's like they obviously take off and run right away. Yep. But it's not the same as like you see one get stuck and it's like, doof,
yeah,
it's just totally different. It looks like a totally different animal trying to run away.
Yep.
Pun intended.
And plus too, and then you could go into talking about the different quality of meat that you're going to get out of an adrenaline dumping animal versus just.
That was another thing that I had just in general heard about, like an adrenaline dumped animal, where it's like people, of course, semi-anecdotally, but I kind of buy it. Is that dump and then them just becoming like not as enjoyable.
Yep.
Although I don't want to go. Never mind. I have a bunny trail, but I digress.
We'll digress. So let's jump in here.
Yeah.
So factor number one. Well,
and we should mention these are actually in order of importance based on the studies.
Yep.
And so like as we go through these, that's the things you want to be thinking about first and kind of down this list based on their studies here.
Yes. So before that, there's one quote here. She's talking about, the rankings are dynamic, like you were saying, under importance, each factor shifts under certain conditions. But he says enhancing any factor boosts your arrow's penetration potential. Diminishing it reduces your arrow penetration potential, etc. And then he ends with to maximize successful hits, always try for the best, but be prepared for the worst. Which I think that is actually really key in figuring out what you want to use. Is obviously if everything goes hunky dory well, and I actually do what I need to do, and I shoot well, like a pass through on especially a whitetail. I mean, that's what we primarily hunt.
Yeah,
it's pretty much anything's going to pass through on a nice, double long, but it's preparing for the worst.
Can we save that quote for our next podcast about the shooting process?
Yes.
Because that actually rings super true to that, and that's been on my mind lately too. But that's
ringing like a gong.
Dude, that's a great quote.
It
Just
is.
Preparing, hoping for the best and then preparing for the worst.
Yes.
So anyway, all right.
Anyhow.
Cool.
So.
Let's roll.
Factor number one, structural integrity. So here, structural integrity of the entire arrow system is the most important factor. It applies to every aspect of the arrow, from the broadhead's tip, edge strength to the nock. Even a tiny tip bend, such as a slight tip curl, results in an average penetration loss of 14%. Structural integrity is a requirement for every hunting arrow, a must-have arrow design feature without which no other factor can be relied upon. Boom.
Dude.
Yeah. So, and I think that's huge. Because if your whole system's weak,
yep,
like it doesn't matter how high of a poundage bow you're shooting, how sharp your broadhead is, how heavy your arrow is, how great of a flight. Like as soon as it hits and it just blows up.
Well, think of it as your strongest point is your weakest link, or what is it? Your weakest link.
Link is here.
How does that go?
Man,
that quote.
We are uneducated. We are uneducated.
We're uneducated. I think they know the saying.
Yes.
But that does go to that. It is like you can have everything just right, and if you're over, there's one point, your weakest link. What are you going to do? That's it.
Yep. Well, I think kind of going back to. Again, this is very limited data and not very scientifically founded. So take it for what it's worth. But like my experience last fall with the arrow setup I had.
Yeah, that's
like
right.
I did tons of research. I read every single one of Dr. Ed Ashby's articles, and they're long and lengthy. Like there's the kind of stuff that nerds read on.
Yeah.
And I geeked out on it. And so I set up what I thought was like this ideal arrow setup, and then only to have it fail structurally, because I still believe that the tip of the front of the arrow was mushroom out because of
so the broadhead broadhead was good.
Broadhead was good.
And then you get next to the insert.
The insert, I think the way it was designed and this amount of impact that the arrow was generating just caused the front end to mushroom out way too easy. And I think that's why I had an arrow stuck in that first deer I shot, which clean shot, like right behind the legs. That front leg was forward. It was right in the heart, like perfectly executed shot, and then no pass through.
Well, and the thing that I was really impacted by as we read through this was the percentages, like how significant the percentages are that they come up with. So something that looks so small to us, where it's like, oh, look at that. It's like starting to, varying degrees, I'm sure, on your arrows. But in light of what we read and figure out and learn about, it was like, oh, that really could have been it. Like, that's all it takes.
Yeah. And FYI, for, like I said, all these percentages that are referenced in this article are gathered from previous articles that they've written. So it's just an FYI. So I don't know. Any other thoughts?
Not on the overall.
So structural integrity. So that's so we concluded, and he's concluded, and we're just reiterating that is the most vital part. Like, your arrow setup's gotta be structurally sound. Which, and you think about it too, like not only the arrow but also the broadhead.
Yeah.
Like that's huge. Like,
well, and one thing that was interesting too is my buddy who had, and this is something that I didn't think about until just now. He had nocks that were breaking. Like they were splitting or falling off, like in flight or whatever, and he could not figure out what it was. And I didn't have enough information. I haven't even looked into it.
Yeah.
But like that right there, if he's saying from broadhead to knock, like that knock's got to have an impact. Like if it's shattering, well, you're not getting all the force from your bow.
Yeah.
And so if your energy, you can have a great broadhead and shaft, fletching, and then your knock splitting while the string is pushing it. Right? You just lose all of your efficiency.
All that. Yeah. Well, that's like, I know too. Iron Will broadheads, like they've put out a ton.
I've heard of them.
Yeah, they're the poor man's broad. Not really. They're the broadheads that we wish we could afford to shoot. So if Iron Will would ever like to sponsor us, we totally.
It's not so much we wish we could do it. I think you've put it best when we've been talking back and forth about whether I want to buy those or not. You're like, I think we'd be too afraid to lose them.
Yes,
and I'm like, touche.
I mean, they're great broadheads, lifetime replacement. Only thing is you can't lose them. And
I've lost some.
I've already lost enough.
Yeah, so good call.
But like what they point out is like with the steel they use and the tips, like their tips they've designed it so it's super strong so that tip is not like bending or curling a little bit and losing the efficiency that it could and should have.
Yeah.
So I think
pretty legit.
Kinda, with broadhead design, something to take in consideration is like what kind of metal, what's the structural integrity of it. I think that to me has been one thing that I've been pondering, which I think we'll probably get to in a future episode as we talk about broadheads and what do we want to use. And
because I don't even know what I'm using yet this year, honestly. I have a couple ideas, but I think maybe we'll work through that together.
It's going to be pointy
and
it's going to be sharp.
Yeah,
I know that.
That's fair enough.
It's going to have some edges.
All right, so arrow flight.
All right, want to go with number 2?
Sure. Arrow flight is number 2 in importance. It's the enabler for the other factors, delivering more usable force on a target and permitting each additional factor to work at full efficiency. Poor flight squanders arrow force. If your broadheads have a different point of impact than your field points, then your setup is not truly tuned. You should spare neither effort nor expense in achieving absolute perfect arrow flight. Even with every other factor in place, without good arrow flight, you will still have poor arrow performance. However, ignore the other design features and you will end up with, and all you'll end up with is a perfectly flying arrow that is still performs poorly on some hits, negating the perfect flight advantage.
So,
as an overall thing, I love that they keep coming back to this overall.
Yes.
Like it's like, okay, yeah, sure, you figure this out, you get that perfect. Yep. It's all for naught if you don't make sure everything else is in place. Yep. But yeah. So what do you think of that part? What kind of comes to mind right away with that?
Yeah. So this is actually something that I've kind of been hearing a lot more about this last year and listening to various podcasts and reading various articles. This idea of having good flight because like. Aaron Snyder pointed out in one podcast, like they were talking about like extreme front of center and how like it's super nice because it'll keep the tip on point, but the back end is flying all over the place, and if it hits and let's say that that arrow shaft, while the point might have hit where you aimed at, that arrow shaft might be like. An extreme case, like sitting off at like 11 o'clock, like you're slamming into an animal and you're losing all that efficiency because it's not driving straight through.
Do you think that, I mean, if you're thinking about it in that light, if you have, let me use this pencil.
We're using a pencil.
So say
so
you have
all of you
something
listening, just watch.
So say you have a liver shot. It's on its way to a
Yep.
liver shot, and it has enough potential to actually take it away from your liver shot. If you're already on a fringe, you didn't make a perfect shot, whatever, animal starts to jump the string, and that could potentially end up taking you off of even a liver shot, like a fringe shot already.
Yeah, because then not only will redirect how and where that arrow goes through into the animal. I'm not sure there's other factors once it gets in. But you think about what do you want? You want that arrow flying in perfectly straight, because obviously the straight line's the quickest line, and maximal energy transfer. Or am I coming in slightly off? So now it's like slamming in rather than poking through.
Yeah. So is that like when I'm shooting at a target, and it's not happening now, but early on, I was seeing, you walk up to your target and you got arrows canted. And I always initially my gut was is that wrong? It should it look like that? Because I feel like it should be flying straight.
Yep.
I mean, I get the paradox.
Yep.
But
you don't have as much paradox with the compound because it's shooting straight down the middle. That's what you're trying to achieve with the compound is a nice straight shot.
Which is why the riser's inset, right?
Yeah, it's cut inside because now you're shooting straight down the string versus a traditional bow.
Trad bow.
A trad bow.
Trad life.
Struggle stick.
Aaron Snyder. Fanboy.
Papa Snyder.
Hipster. Continue.
So that arrow flexes around, and it recovers. But the one caveat though to the direction of your arrows pointing in the target medium, I've heard some people say that can be a little difficult, unless you get in every single arrow pointing the same way, which is why you need to shoot multiple, because sometimes it can hit and it'll go off in a funky angle.
Yeah.
So you need those multiple arrows, they're facing left or they're facing right, and then that it gets into arrow tuning.
Yeah, and then the other thing that I had a question about too for me, because I haven't shot anything besides mechanicals as far as broadheads, obviously. It says if your broadheads have a different point of impact than your field points, then your setup is not truly tuned.
Yep.
So and for me, what I'm having trouble wrapping my mind around is people are like, oh, you adjust the rest, and it's you get to where they're both hitting.
Yeah.
It's but if my they're both 100 grains. I get there's the flight's going to change with different broadheads.
Yeah.
Right, but how do you end up having them both end up at the same spot?
I think we can.
That's what I have a hard time with.
We'll touch upon that in a future episode.
Okay.
Because that's that could be two different issues. Because you could still have two perfectly straight flying arrows, but they're just impacting different. Mm-hmm. And versus if you throw a broadhead, I know some people talk about whatever factors are going on there. If you throw a broadhead and you're seeing that arrow porpoise or go back, up and down, because I see that every once in a while with if I have a bad release, finger release, I'll see my arrow, I can see those fletchings,
you've had some
flopping up. You've seen it.
That's what's been interesting is you can actually watch how the arrow's flying and get that snippet of feedback.
Yeah.
Whereas the bow, compound.
Well, it's actually really bad with the compound. When you see it on a compound, it's bad because it's just.
You can hear it.
Yeah, when you can see the fletchings at 20 yards just flying around in a circle, you're like, ugh, something's off.
And you can also watch when the trad bow, when you get you can just watch that thing spin, and I'm that is beautiful.
It is, nice flight. That's why we do the trad life.
Yeah, okie dokie. Moving right along.
So first one was structural integrity. Second one, good arrow flight.
Yep.
You want that pointy thing flying straight.
Yep, I like it.
And there's, we won't get into all the factors because, quite frankly, we're not the experts on how to achieve that.
Yeah, go read the
We're
article,
just reading
people.
the experts and talking about.
Giving our thoughts and questions. That's all.
More so our questions.
Okay.
All right, so number 3.
Are you just going to do the one paragraph on this?
Yeah, because we don't want to fuck it up.
Yeah. And people, and again, this is why we'll have a link so people can dig into it.
So the arrow's weight forward of center, FOC. Fuck. Man.
Mature.
We are so mature. Parents, please. Yeah.
Forgive us.
Anyhow, or how close an arrow's balance point is to the arrow's tip comes in as number 3 factor. Using arrows having extreme or ultra extreme EFOC and ultra EFC does more than any other feature except flight quality to maximize the effects of other factors offer. Ultra EFC is defined as above 30% using the AMO standard formula. you can go into a different article. EFOC is defined as 19 to 30% FOC. So here, the first measurable tissue penetration gains due to FOC are manifested at the EFC level, 19%, with penetration gains continuing to increase as FOC increases. So then it goes into giving a lot of numbers and other studies. And the one thing that was interesting down here in the last part, it says the preponderance of actual complete pass-through hunting shots on buffalo have occurred with compound bows having draw weights from 65 to 70 pounds. Exactly why, when using directly comparable arrow setups, compound bows in the 65 to 70 pound draw weight range are yielding a much higher rate percentage of pass-through shots on a hunted buffalo than our compound bows having higher draw weights remains, at this time, an unknown, though I do have a suspicion why. Nevertheless, this outcome data from hunted buffalo is clearly present and at a significant level. This is an item that warrants further testing. So,
yes.
So here's you go first. Okay. So here's probably in my non-expert thoughts and thoughts, opinions. Yeah, like where this is a lot of salt needs to be taken with this. It's probably the one area I probably disagree.
I was wondering about that because I was like, do I need to change my arrow setup?
Yes, Ethan, you need to somehow get 35% FOC. So I'll give you kind of quick reasons.
Duct tape some sinkers to the front
as it just starts going head over tails. He said it would work.
All right. Anyway.
Yeah, that negates the arrow flight quality. Touché. So my disagreement comes from more so other arguments I've heard from other experts. I think Aaron Snyder has talked a lot about that. I mean, he covered this a lot last year just because it was the hot topic. FOC, high FOC, was the latest and greatest, thing to come along last year. People were buying into. I mean, that's what got me actually kind of into reading Dr. Ed Ashby's, because he was really a big proponent of it and how to do that and what the benefits are, yada, yada. But like him, John Dudley have talked about is a lot of times when people are trying to chase this high FOC, it's screwing up some other things, mainly good arrow flight. Like they talked about like how, because some people that are big proponents of high FOC talking about like in crosswinds, having a higher FOC will keep that tip point on target. But like they brought up in a counter argument is, well, what's happening to that back end? Because from their experience, what they see is that back end now is getting blown all around, even though the tip is staying on target, therefore reducing arrow flight quality.
Which is number two. Yeah. So that was one thing
I feel like we need a button. Yeah. Number 2.
I'll throw some sound effects in. No, but that was one thing that I was a little bit taken back by, because everybody I've heard is like, even when I was at the shop the other day, the guy's like, oh, what are you running? Because I was getting some new arrows and weights or whatever put together. And he was like taken back that I was at what is it, like 13, 14, mid-teens?
Yeah, I think with that setup, like, it's like 14, 15%.
He's like, what poundage are you shooting? It's like, S. Dustin. Just kidding. No, I told him 68. But like that was, so when I read this, I was like, why is everybody so off put? But kind of what you're saying is like you've had some other input too, and obviously like take a lot of this with a grain of salt, because people are going to have different ideas and
I think it's one of those things too, because then it kind of goes in the factor, like especially for compound more so than the like recurves or longbows. With compounds, when I was designing my arrow setups and trying to make sense of all of this data and the different various arguments, was it's hard to actually get a good high FOC with a compound setup, because you need so much weight up front that, especially if you're running a higher 60, 65, 70 plus pound bow, that the arrow spine or the arrow stiffness that you need to get is just so hard to obtain, because there's just so few arrow shafts, running 250, 200, 150 spines out there. And then those that typically those arrow shafts are going to be heavier because they have to be thicker walled anyhow. So now that changes, or other guys will do, like I was looking at for a while, was like you get a really light shaft, and then that way you can put all this weight up front. But then the problem is that light shaft therefore reduces the number one factor.
structural
integrity. Okay. Because it's so light that it's becoming brittle for hunting, which, target wise works fine. Hunting wise, now you're taking away the number one factor. And so it seemed like what I kind of rested on was what guys like Dudley and Snyder and others kind of said from experience was, listen, I found kind of 12 to 15% tended to be the sweet spot for all the arrows. And that's like another guy I was reading, Byron Ferguson, who's like one of the world's best trick shots with the trad bow. He even talked about in his book, Becoming the Arrow, that he said, somewhere between 10 to 15% seems to be the sweet spot. And so I think just overall arrow performance, and then you get into like the different weights, because then if you want to keep a certain, arrow speed for the trajectory you want, well, now you can't be running too heavy because now you're going to drop way off. So there's a lot of arguments. I kind of fell back on okay, more than anything, what's going to give me good arrow flight with a good overall arrow weight that's going to give me the trajectory I want, and kind of, sure, I don't doubt that more weight up front probably enhances penetration. Yeah. But to what cost?
Yeah. You start dancing on the razor's edge as far as what can you get away with almost? And it's where, like you said, the sweet spot, I think, is an important way to put it.
Yeah.
Because it's all right, well, you're going to be safe and you are getting a lot of the advantages at this percentage.
Yep.
So just checking that out. So,
yeah. So I know, for me, it seems to be those arrows I set up for you. They're running, I think 14, 15%, 100 grain insert, 100 grain broadhead.
Yep, just what I asked for. Yep.
Following
my lead. All right, number 4.
Oh
my gosh. Okay, hold on. All right,
on,
yeah, we're gonna do
be
that.
Serious, Ethan.
You can't go Jocko mid podcast. All right, mechanical advantage. Mechanical advantage of the broadhead ranks as number 4. Mechanical advantage refers to how steep the angle is on the blades of the broadhead. Just like an inclined ramp, the longer the length of the ramp in relation to its rise, the less energy it takes to get to the top of the incline. Where this is not true, where this not true, that I think there's actually a typo.
Yeah, there might be a typo.
Okay, I was am I just dumb and blind here?
Where that's not true.
There we go. Yeah, I was home teached. Yep, the disclaimer. Were this not true, it's a sure bet that wheelchair ramps for the handicap would be short and steep. The mechanical advantage of a broadhead also changes if it has more blades. If 2 broadheads have the same length and width, but one has more blades, the one with more blades will have a poorer mechanical advantage and will require more energy to penetrate. The degree of penetration gain varies depending on which broadheads are compared. Broadhead mechanical advantage has a more pronounced influence on the outcome penetration of a perfect flying, structurally secure arrow than any other factor except FOC. Higher mechanical advantage increases the work your arrow can do with whatever useful force is available. Its advantage is applicable to all arrows of all designs. However, the more efficient the rest of your arrow is, the more penetration gain higher broadhead mechanical advantage yields. And then it has some reference on there.
That, I'll be honest, this one is almost a little over my head because I'm not a...
I can't even. I'm this is the first
we
time
struggled reading it.
This is so true. Sorry, Mom. No, for me, this is the first time I've even heard mechanical advantage. Not this time, but when I read this
in this reference,
ago, I was like, wait, mechanical advantage. I'm like, oh, well, I'm glad they explained it right away because I had no idea what that means. It seems, how do you end up calculating that? How would we, layman's, how do we work through some of that?
We talk to somebody really smart, a scientist or an engineer. If we have any engineering fans listening to this, please reach out to us and educate us.
Well, you can definitely.
Uneducated people. With pictures, preferably with pictures.
So did you have any take on this? Or are we moving right along?
Well, I think, I don't have a whole lot of thoughts on, because I just haven't developed or researched enough. I've heard like the one thing that Ashby talks about, others talk about, the kind of the old school of the 3-to-1 angle. 3 inches long to 1 inch wide is apparently the best mechanical advantage angle. I've heard that. I couldn't give you a take either way.
Yeah.
I think this also, the one kind of caveat or, detail that differs for someone like Ed Ashby testing these arrows versus you and I shooting whitetails is they were shooting large African animals, which they need a lot more penetration ability than we do with a soft whitetail. Like the whitetail deer does not take a whole lot to get a pass through.
Yeah,
like,
it's really if you hit it in soft tissue.
Yeah, you hit it in soft tissue. Even the ribs, those ribs on like that. I was using the Schwacker. I don't even remember which model it was. It was like they're all stainless steel, which really like afterwards, like I've shot it into the ground. I've
shot some of mine into the ground too,
and
on purpose, of course.
And I've seen like how easily that metal, like it's such a soft metal, bends, and yet I shot that broadhead through.
Yeah,
the blades are fine, the metal is fine, and it broke a couple ribs.
Yeah.
So really, in all reality, whitetail deer don't require a high level of having this like super crazy penetration enhanced mechanical advantage per se.
Yeah, I'd probably agree. I think a big part of even us talking about it, and like again, when we're going into a lot of this stuff, we're learning about it. We're not coming in as experts, and so hopefully, if someone out there is like, "Well, I know I got 1 through 3 figured out, and so this is the next thing I want to tackle." At least it's something we're putting on people's minds.
Yeah,
so.
I think for me, as I kind of process like broadheads, structural integrity to me is probably the one that I'm looking at more than mechanical advantage.
Yeah,
because I feel like if I can nail down the structural integrity for a whitetail,
because
I mean even if I hit the front shoulder,
with
as long as it's a structurally sound broadhead, that's, sharp, like. It's probably gonna
and it's not damage. Like you're just like sacrificing, like you're just going, I'm gonna buy $10 broadheads. You are like, we still are trying to figure out the best thing, within a reasonable rate type of thing, but we're just not down to calculating.
And we're not going out trying to shoot water buffaloes.
All right, let me do number 5. Let me not let me do, but let me introduce it. Okay?
Oh, okay.
Number 5.
Is that Jocko enough for you?
That went beyond Jocko. That went to like radio host.
Number 5.
Shaft diameter. This is an interesting one. Shaft diameter to ferrule diameter ratio is number 5. It shows an average.
Number 5.
Jeez.
Okay, come on.
10%.
Be serious.
10% penetration gain when the shaft is at least 5% smaller than the broadhead's ferrule. So I'll save people the numerous percentages that he lists in this one. He goes on and on. So basically, it says here, you should avoid use of arrows having a shaft diameter greater than that of your broadhead's ferrule. I think that captures it perfectly.
That does.
So in other words,
what more?
Yeah, so in other words, you're basically trying to reduce drag.
Yes.
Have that
the hole
shaft
the broadhead should make is wider.
Should be bigger than the shaft.
Yeah. Okay. Well, all right. Well, that sums that up, doesn't it?
Yes. So I think that I mean, in all reality, like. I haven't seen. So actually, real quick, in trying to design the arrows I'm using this year for my trad bow.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of ethics.
Trad life.
Yeah, trad life.
Struggle
stick. Hashtag. Ethics archery. Papa Snyder.
Oh my god.
So
that's
ethics.
Bad. Is that for real?
Yeah. So ethics archery, I love their component system. I think they're great. Like they're great. They're great quality, fitting, etc. Well, I love their dual system insert outsert. It's like an insert, and then it's got like a half out, and then it has a sleeve, and just provides like a rock solid insert system. And it's like, oh, well, I'm gonna pick that up for the arrows I'm using this year, and we'll just make like bomb proof arrows. Well, I'm using standard diameter shafts this year versus the other years I was using smaller ones. Well, when I got that and got the insert systems, I realized real quick, shoot, this actually isn't going to work because of this, because that whole shaft system, especially the sleeve, that sleeve was bigger than the broadhead ferrules.
And did you read this before, or was it just like intuition? You're like, that doesn't make sense.
I'd read this before in a previous, so it was in the back of my mind, but it was one of those rare cases. It was like, oh, hey, I read this. And I mean, and even just common sense too,
Yeah. Like that's, I think with a lot of these, a lot of it probably is like, oh, I don't need to go throw away my arrows. But when I am looking at arrows and adding things on, it's like some of those things, if it starts to click, I mean, like after reading this, for me, that probably the same thing would happen if I'm starting to put things together and I'm going, yeah, that's not right. Now you know.
Now you know. So that was one of those rare cases where it's like, oh, hey, look, this is probably not a good idea. So I ended up, switching that out.
You can do I'll do number 6, but you want to introduce it? See what kind of introduction you can come up with.
Number 6. I'm just not as
was good.
No, not as epic as you.
No, smooth on the front end, and then get a little rasp.
Number 6.
And a little. All right. How much of this are we going to read through? There's like 5 paragraphs.
Arrow mass, huh?
Yeah. I'll start. You stop me.
All right. Just read the bold-lined lines.
Just the bold ones? Okay. Bullet points.
Yeah.
When all...
Or hold on. Well, actually, it's maybe the first paragraph.
First paragraph, and then we'll go highlighted ones?
Yeah.
All right. Sounds good. Arrow mass is closely related to arrow weight, but isn't exactly the same. When it comes to calculating either arrow force or arrow energy, mass is the correct term. However, unless doing these calculations, you can think of arrow mass as being arrow weight.
Thank you for the clarification, Dr. Ashby. Us uneducated folks.
Dr. Taylor, you can just call me that.
That's Dr. Taylor, yeah, wow.
That's my alias is Dr. Ashby. When all else is equal, an arrow's tissue penetration is directly proportional to its momentum.
Okay, so this was actually huge when I first learned about this.
Okay.
So it gets into the argument of what's better, aerokinetic energy or momentum. I mean, big concepts here. And so basically, in layman's term, for us uneducated folks, what I learned was, so kinetic energy refers basically to all the stored potential amount of energy that arrow has, versus momentum, which is a directionally related. Wow. See, I can't even.
You can do this. You can do this. I believe
in you, Dusty. Directly measured. Force of energy. So basically, it's measuring what amount of energy is going to be able to be driven forward through that projectile. Okay. Versus kinetic energy is just how much possible energy total that arrow has, regardless of direction.
Interesting. Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think it does.
All right. So yeah,
we'll listen to this later and realize it doesn't.
It probably doesn't.
We're going to leave it in anyway.
And so that actually was really interesting, and in fact, we'll link another study done by DIY Hunter, who
he's cool.
He actually did a really cool study of measuring different arrow weights and their speeds, kinetic energy, and momentum, and show it on a graph how they compare.
I did even skim that too,
and that was actually
a lot for me.
I know that's really asking a lot of you. all that non scouting stuff.
You're like you're my Cliff Notes for all things technical.
Just tell me what it says there, Dusty.
The funny part is this whole thing, like all the highlighted stuff. Like if I just did that, I'd probably be like, "Yep, that's about sums it up for me."
What I thought was like DIY Hunter's findings was like he went from like 350 grains or something all the way up to like 1,000+ grain arrow, and like the kinetic energy really didn't change a whole lot, but the momentum energy levels changed a ton. So we'll link to that. I think it provides just an interesting, because obviously like with anything, that arrow weight or arrow mass, however you want to call it, does correlate with, again, kind of what is the trajectory that you want? What is the arrow speed range that you want? Because that kind of dictates, well, how heavy of an arrow do I want?
Yeah, because it can really, I mean, that's what was interesting too, is I think it was this part actually that I started reading where it's like, if you're not shooting super long distances, you can afford to have
a really heavy arrow.
Yeah.
Especially with like, and again, kind of going back to what a lot of us hunt, or you and I hunt, is whitetail.
Yeah. And most of the time, big woods.
Yeah. So, I mean, a 40-yard shot would be really long.
Yeah, it would be.
And so in all reality, it's like, okay, we can probably get away with a heavier arrow setup. And again, kind of going back to some other things that I've heard from guys like Snyder and Dudley, they all kind of agree, these guys, if you can get close to or around like a 500+ grain arrow and still keep your trajectories you want, like that kind of seems again to be the sweet spot for good arrow weight, good arrow, mass, and still have good trajectory if you're shooting a higher poundage bow.
Yeah, and I don't think you know, I think of like as we started talking about that, I was like, oh, my AR, because I started out, but I know I'm going off track here, but like I started out with that being like,
this is a gun-free zone, Ethan.
No, it's not.
Just kidding.
Yeah, welcome
Just
to
kidding,
our Gun
folks.
Got podcast.
Yeah.
We reference this once in a while. It's probably impossible to find us.
We have shot a gun before we picked up a bow and totally forgot about what they are.
But I changed my AR probably 4 or 5 times to try to basically. I ended up starting out like super like
pointed at one specific thing, and I'm like, man, realistically, I need to basically find the sweet spot. And so, really being able to like, it makes sense to have to apply that to this as well. What are we on?
What are we on? He's got some interesting. He talks about here. I don't know. This one, he gets quite interesting.
Which one?
I'm trying to look. I'm trying to remember one. Oh, he even says here, you should always use the heaviest arrow possible that has a trajectory that you still find acceptable. I like that. Even with every other penetrating enhancing factor in place, greater arrow mass still equates more usable force and more outcome penetration. See article Momentum, Kinetic Energy, and Arrow Penetration.
And then the next one, kinetic energy is not a predictor of outcome tissue penetration and, by its very definition, not a measure of an arrow's force. And then what else we got?
Yeah.
Kinetic energy should be used as a guideline nor requirement for terminal arrow performance.
So I like this. So this is really helpful. It says here, momentum belongs to the arrow. It is a property of the arrow carried within it. It is derived from the arrow's forward motion and the arrow's mass. As an arrow penetrates, velocity is shed. So as it gets slower, the velocity is shedding, but the arrow's mass remains constant. So at equal impact force, equal arrow momentum, the heavier your arrow, the longer it retains momentum and the longer it takes to stop. The result is deeper tissue penetration. Further benefits of a heavier arrow mass includes less wind drift, smoother release, and a significantly quieter bow and less vibration hand shock. So I think that actually really sums it up well. That section is, I like that. Like, okay, the heavier arrow is, the harder it's going to be to stop. Like if any of us ever paid attention in high school, science class,
Count me out.
Yeah, we're screwed.
but yeah.
And I like that. Like he even says here. Plus, too, I know one thing guys talk about. Like the heavier arrow, the more efficiency tends to get transferred to that. The more energy it can store, and the more efficiency that can get stored into that arrow. And so this is cool. We can also provide a link for this. This is a sweet article that I read on the long distance effects of heavier versus lighter arrows. And so if I can sum it up well, hopefully I can do it, is if a heavy arrow and a light arrow get shot at the same time, the lighter arrow will obviously be shooting faster out to a certain point, which the article is saying, around 40 yards. That the lighter arrow will hit at 40 yards quicker. But if you were to keep going, that lighter arrow loses its velocity much faster than the heavier arrow, so you can actually get out to even further distances. This is more applicable to Western hunters.
Yep.
But you get out to further distances, and that heavier arrow will actually shoot flatter further because it retains the velocity better than the lighter arrow. So,
man, I'm trying to think if I'm
does
he talk about not being able to measure like coefficiency? Does that ring a bell?
He might have.
There was something along the lines that where
I don't think that was in this.
Okay,
Yeah.
right.
So we'll provide a link to that article talking about the science of light versus heavier arrows and
you better be taking notes.
Shed
on
velocity.
Article. Yeah.
Velocity, shed, whatever you want to call it. It's really cool. So, anyhow.
What one are we on? Are you doing 7, right?
Number 7.
No, I'm doing.
Okay,
that
go
right.
ahead.
Number 7.
Yeah, that's true. You got such a good voice for that.
I don't.
God. And this is where we lose all of our listeners.
They do get shorter. It seems like they get shorter as they lose relevancy.
So number 7, blade edge finish.
Yeah, guys, check out your blade edge finish.
Yeah.
Moving right along.
So basically, if you're not shaving, well, if you're a man, you shouldn't be shaving, period, like Ethan.
I don't know what that was supposed to be manly,
Wow.
but it wasn't.
Okay, Tim Allen.
Let's just keep it like this.
So a smooth beard shaving sharp. Ooh, there it is. Hone and
Yuck.
strop edge works best. Its advantage is most pronounced in fibrous tissues. In fibrous tissues, it shows a 26% advantage over a smoothly filed sharpened edge and a 60+ advantage over a hill-type serrated edge, whatever that is. I didn't look that up. It's an advantage available for all broadhead designs and for all arrows. It says here, the thinnest, smoothest, sharpest edge one can achieve while still maintaining an edge undamaged during penetration slices tissue with the greatest efficiency, creating the maximum amount of blood loss.
Does that just go to what kind of metal your broadhead is? Like when you look at like the super magnified iron will ones compared to other ones where there's like burrs or it's not quite as smooth and pointed. Like pretty much you look at what metal you're looking at. I mean, as far as...
Should we provide a link for that?
No, please don't. People can look up something.
Because I'm just going to make Ethan provide all these links, even though he has no reference to half of them.
Hey, you know what? I should be reading them. Why not?
You don't want to.
Oh, good. I got a really long part. Are you ready? You can do this one.
No, we're not.
I'm reading it. You're introducing it.
We're not done. We're not done with number 7.
Oh, we are.
So basically what this says is, hey, like I hear two things. One, does your broadhead have quality metal? Is it going to retain its edge slicing through hide, bone, other soft tissue, starting from the outside of the deer, going through it and coming back out? Like, does it have a good quality metal that can retain its sharpness? And B, or number 2, however you want to look at it, is it sharpened from the get-go? Because how many of your friends do you know, and did you ever look at how sharp your broadheads were last year?
I actually did. But
did you cut yourself?
This does. No, I didn't actually. Thankfully,
they weren't sharp enough.
Yeah. Well, handle them right. Anyway, this for me is a little bit challenging because like I use mechanical blades, and if I look at my mechanical blades, that
I speak of no such vile things.
Oh my gosh. If I look at my
It's
mechanical...
all the rage.
I'm not going to do my shtick on that right now.
Please, we'll save that.
But no, looking at my blades, basically, I mean, I ruined three expandable blades.
Yep.
And it was like, they're garbage after one use. And those are coming out. They're thin.
Yeah.
They're very narrow. And so now it's like challenging my view on like, should I be shooting fixed?
So is it because
if it's
not only fixed, but like
it's number 7.
But that number 7 kind of also ties back to structural integrity.
Yeah.
Like is that
they were
broadhead?
Yeah, they're getting bird. And
they're getting bird. Like it's losing.
Yeah.
It's
I guess I'm buying iron
We're
wills.
going buying iron wills. Or day 6.
Day 6.
Yep. Papa Snyder.
I've heard of them.
So I don't know. It's something to think about. Definitely, because I know too many guys, too many of my friends just grab whatever broadheads, either whatever ones they have or whatever they have out of the package, and don't touch them up at all.
Yeah.
And like every blade, unless you're buying like super top quality high end, and even those, I've seen the high end ones. They tend to come instructed, hey, these still have a slight burr from sharpening that you're going to have to strop out.
Interesting.
So,
yeah,
definitely something to take into consideration. Sharpen your blades.
At least check them.
Because
that's not that big of a just check them.
Okay. There's an analogy I want to use, but I'll keep this PG. I'll keep this. Yeah. Anyhow, moving on.
Wow, very mature of you.
Good
Dusty.
sharp edge. That's what we want.
All right.
You're going to introduce me to this one.
Number 8.
Shaft profile. Tapered shafts show an 8% penetration advantage over parallel shafts
and 15% over barrel tapered shafts. Parallel shafts show 7% advantage over barrel tapered shafts. This is applicable to all arrows and shaft materials on all hits. See Arrow Lethality Part 2 in the Natal Study and 2004 Update Part 2. Gosh.
So, what's your takeaway?
I did actually find this a little interesting because I saw that they started making like actual taper, I was looking at these tapered shafts and I was like, I wonder what that actually does. It makes sense just looking at it, but how much of an effect could it have?
Yeah.
And I mean, when we talk about like trying to be as lethal as possible, 8% penetration advantage, makes me think about it.
Yep, 50%.
Like, I'm not going to get rid of my arrows, but a lot of this, like, when I go to, if I want to do a new setup or start to get different arrows, I'm probably going to come back to this and be like, all right, how can I, what ones I'm going to maximize?
How can you maximize?
Really,
And so I think with this, it's kind of another one of those things like, okay, if I'm going like big game hunting, like maybe a once in a lifetime hunt, a dangerous game, I'll definitely probably factor this in. For my whitetail hunting, for my turkey hunting, for the hunting that you and I are going to typically do, I'm not too worried about this.
Well, we're getting into the final stages here, so most of these will probably be like, just think about it.
Yep. Good thoughts. Anyhow, moving on.
What was that, number 8?
That was number 8. So we are
number 9.
Broadhead arrow silhouette. Any rough or irregular surface increases your arrow drag in all tissues. It effects is more pronounced during bone penetration. The less bumpy your arrow and broadhead silhouette, the more effortlessly it passes through tissues. How gradual and smoothly the broadhead's ferrule fades into the blade becomes a major penetration factor when heavy bone is hit.
I mean,
thoughts?
I guess what my mind goes to is like a low profile broadhead that's kind of longer, right? And then also fletch. And how low profile your fletching is.
Yeah.
So like I've increased, like I'm shooting 4 fletch.
Yeah.
But they're very small fletches.
Very smaller fletching. So the overall circular diameter of that is going to be smaller.
Right.
So
I don't feel like that's too bad.
Yeah.
But as I'm thinking about broadheads, like that's a lot of the thing that I'm probably going to be thinking about the most going forward right now is what broadheads I'm going to end up using.
Yeah. So this one, like you said, I don't necessarily have a whole lot of thoughts. Because I haven't generated a whole lot, though there's one set of broadheads I'm looking at that I'm really interested in, those alien archery broadheads from Australia. I really like, in reference to this factor, how smooth they are. The blade is solid. The ferrule is a nice, really smooth design. So that's when I saw that, I was like, oh, I saw that factor.
Nice.
I feel educated.
Nice.
Man, I feel so educated. He also says additional slickness helps too in the shaft finish. He says your arrow shaft finish should be as smooth and slick as possible.
Yep. So Vaseline all your arrows is what I got from that. What about you?
Yeah, I was thinking Crisco.
But for you people that are like me out there, when you shoot an arrow into the ground, clean it up.
Yeah,
like
that is true.
I do wash my arrows if I make a bad shot.
And also like these. Okay, so
what is important? It does create drag.
I haven't done this, and I'm totally speaking from a secondhand view. But when I do hear of guys talk about, oh yeah, I shot an animal or 2 or 3 and still use the same broadhead without even touching it up. Cool. Like, okay, why wouldn't you? Like, again, going back to
what point are you trying
as
to
sharp
prove?
And smooth as possible. Come on. Put in a little extra work.
Yeah, I don't know what point they're trying to prove, I guess.
Yeah.
So
that they're just trying to say, the broadhead. And a lot of times, if I'm honest, like a lot of times I hear it in reference to how XYZ broadhead is the latest and greatest and toughest broadhead.
That's a fair point because I think a lot of people will probably I examine mine.
We call that fake news. Man. It does say here Teflon broadhead finishes offer advantages. So I know some broadheads are Teflon coated. It says coated heads average 12% more penetration on soft tissue hits. There appears to be no effect on bone penetration. So
there you go.
Teflon finish those suckers. The crucial element is to have as few ups, downs, bumps, and lumps. I like that.
Yeah, it's pretty. Like they said, it excludes the one step down from your arrow.
Yep.
You should have, and then basically, like we said, just low profile.
Yeah.
Right.
If you can.
Silhouette's not too crazy.
Yeah.
All right.
So, number 10.
Type of edge bevel. I'm going to get straight to the point with this one.
Thank you.
Pun intended. Basically, single bevel broadheads consistently cause a high frequency of massive bone splits, especially in long bones. I'll add, there is no downside to using single bevel broadheads on any type of hit. There is a demonstrated upside, especially when bone is hit. With a right single bevel.
I won't even.
Not going that.
I think that gets over. I gets over my head.
Yeah, I guess I was again like this. This is semi paradigm shifting. Although like you're probably gonna get into like the big game thing again, but if it is like that for a single bevel.
But I've also heard. So this is where it's been fun hearing some of the counter arguments from guys that. The designer of Iron Will, Valkyrie Broadhead Systems, and a couple others, talking about like when people ask like, how come you didn't go single bevel, you went double bevel, or you went this, and they've talked about how in other studies it's basically been proven that single bevel doesn't offer the claimed advantage it does of rotating into the bone and like twisting the bone.
Yeah. Okay.
So,
yeah.
So I don't know. I'm not educated enough.
Yeah.
I think they got arguments from both sides. Kind of.
But people can look into it. It's a factor.
It's a factor. So.
Ready?
Kind of. What is you like? That's what it boils down to. What makes you feel comfortable?
Yeah, that's true. Depending on what you're hunting.
Yep.
Number 11.
Tip design. Tips. The tip design. Oh, what?
Sum it up.
Yeah. So it says here, the tip's design's greatest importance is on shot impacting bone. And their studies show that the Tanto tip shows the best performance. In other words, that it holds up the best. It demonstrates the lowest frequency of skidding off bone on angular impacts. That's actually something that I have heard kind of across the board is the Tanto tip tends to be the best structurally sound tip design out there. So, which I thought was interesting. I know like in Valkyrie Broadhead Systems. Are you familiar with the Valkyrie system?
Slightly.
Yeah, I mean they're really nice. I love all the aspects of it, but like his system, he's got a really he follows that 3-to-1 angular design or ratio, and he's got a really pointy tip, which a lot of guys, I mean penetration wise, like phenomenal.
Yeah.
But I have heard like, when it hits bone, that's when the tip starts, curling, bending, breaking.
Yeah.
So, I don't know.
Something to
I'm
consider.
just throwing it out there for my expertise.
You don't
Uneducated perspective.
You don't have to keep disclaimering. We got it.
Yeah, I just don't want people to, assume because, of how we sound that we're such deep experts.
Because you're hearing us on something super official like Apple or Podbean, we're pretty much scientists.
It's on the internet. You should believe us. Number 12.
Arrow mass above the heavy bone threshold. I don't even know what that means. The degree of arrow FOC shows no effect on the heavy bone threshold, but does show a significant penetration increase once the bone is breached. What?
So in other words, to sum up, having read this one multiple times on his other articles, is basically what they found was an overall arrow weight of 650 grains, near around there, seems to be the amount of arrow weight you need to have to really start blowing through bones.
All right.
The counter arguments that I've heard to that, which I think is valid, is the previous studies had been done with recurves and actually relatively low poundage recurves. Like the one guy, I forget his name. I can't remember his name, but he talked about like what he would like to see is with the compounds, what's that overall arrow mass required for compounds? Because it's got to be different.
Yeah.
So there's still a lot of like scientific study weaklings in a lot of these studies done from what I've heard from other guys.
Yeah.
That they would like to see, but like overall, like what Dr. Ashby has done and what kind of questions I think he has generated from his studies that has been invaluable because now it's got guys like you and I going, what about this? How does this apply to me? What can I do? And what do I want to do?
Yeah, I like it. I think it'd be cool to do do you want to read the last couple paragraphs on does it make enough difference to matter? Ooh. Because that's when I read and I was like, you know what? That's like, okay, all right, I'm listening.
So the two quotes that I love from this is one, the penetration gain obtainable by increasing your bow's draw weight pales, he says, in comparison to that achieved through better arrow design. He goes on to say, enhancing arrow performance reaps far richer rewards than does increasing draw weight.
He just mic dropped a
yeah.
piece of paper. Just so you guys are aware, he mic dropped.
I couldn't actually drop the mic.
No,
because it's tied to the table.
Fair enough. That's good.
But no, like those two statements really like wow, like that. Those are deep.
Yeah, I think that was it does like I said,
a little bit for me where it's like so much emphasis is on the bow. What's the next greatest new advantage and thing? And it's just like the arrows. I won't say an afterthought.
Yeah.
But the bow's probably 70% of my thought, and the arrow's 30% of my thought.
And how much is the broadhead?
Which I understand, right?
It's like 5%.
No, the broadhead I'm struggling with. Okay, originally I just took what I had and went with it. This year it'll be a little bit more than 5%. Thank you very much. But no, it does give a little bit of a paradigm shift in realizing that there's so much hype around the bows and there's so much hype around what's new, what little, how many feet per second are we gaining with this bow?
Yeah.
And then it's like, okay, look at what you can get out of your arrow. Like that's what's really going to matter.
Well, that's like Byron Ferguson in his book, Becoming the Arrow. His big thing is, okay, what's the kill delivery system? It's not the bow.
Yeah.
It's the arrow. And it's the broadhead. Like that, he's like, that is what matters in the actual killing aspect. And it's just like when I read that, I was like, oh, shoot. Like, yep. I've totally been looking at this all wrong.
And if I can bring us back to our gun podcast, welcome. I would like to say
in
that I do look at how much the bullet, how important the bullet is, right?
Yeah.
I did not transfer that over to archery because I shouldn't say because, but
we're uneducated.
I was way more inundated with okay, you've got your gun and everything's kind of at this certain level, and then you got to figure out what bullet shoots well out of your gun. Like I've shot multiple different sets of ammo. I've shot things
caliber
that are literally just different brands, and one shoots.
Probably should be shooting different calibers.
But I had shot like the exact same loads, all the same information, 2 different brands, and one shot better out of my gun than the other. And am I doing that with my bow? Not quite.
Nope.
But it's much easier to acquire bullets than it is to have a full-on arrow set up.
Yes, that is the one downside about archery. Like, you would think it would almost be easier, but it's not.
Can I buy a 1-pack of arrows?
And I think, but I mean, to a small degree, obviously, newer bows are more efficient systems to use. You found that out going from your brother's old bow to the Barracuda, and how the ability to tune and the overall efficiency of that system was way better. So obviously there's that factor, but we have to look at it from not what's the latest, coolest, greatest, but how efficient is this system? How well does it correlate with the actual killing mechanism?
Yep.
So
I'm going to read one more thing to put everybody to sleep.
All right.
Does it sound impossible? Tripling penetration by changing arrow design. That's what a 200% increase implies, 3 times as much. Consider the implications. An arrow that penetrates 15 inches instead of 5, 30 inches instead of 10, or 45 inches instead of 15. This is the type of penetration gain indicated between an arrow fully penetration maximized and one lacking these factors. That to me, I'll finish here. The most startling thing is if you fully maximize your arrow's penetration potential and compare it to one with none of the features, the indicated 200% increase is actually too low.
Oof.
Now I mic dropped with a piece of paper.
Piece of paper.
So that's that to me. I'm not gonna go sell and break all my arrows over my knee or anything like that. But I am going to be taking it a lot more seriously, being like, it's not just my poundage, right? Because I went from 60 pounds to I maxed out my limbs, so 68 I think.
Because you got your little T-Rex arms.
Yeah, I do have T-Rex arms. And I'm thinking, oh, there we go, right? Yeah. But now it's like, I got a bit more to take to consider. But
yeah, really, I love about this because it's concise, like it's actually pretty readable, like compared to all of his other studies.
Yeah, when I saw 9 pages, I was like, nope, and then I read the intro, I was like, okay, I'm in.
Yeah, and just because it presents not like, oh, this piece of equipment or this brand is better, but it's okay. Here are some principles
and features
that you want to take into consideration. So
yeah.
So I thank you all who stayed around for this whole podcast and listened to us, because what we would like actually to hear is what are you guys running? What's your arrow setup? What are you running for broadheads? What are factors that you by experience that we don't have, because we're coming at this from being again complete noobs.
Yep.
What do you like? What have you found to work well? What have you found not to work? We'd love to hear.
I would be interested also in the biggest thing they felt like they overlooked, whether it's number 9 or whatever. I mean, I hope it's not number 1, but I know I didn't even think, I was again just kind of leaned on you.
Lean on me.
I will. So if there's something you guys are like, oh snap, I want to hear about it, that'd be awesome.
We'd love to hear it. We'd love to just get kind of a dialogue going and see what people are using out there.
Yeah. So. Hey, I do want to go over real quick.
All right.
We do have a giveaway coming up.
Ooh, this is an exciting one.
Yeah, so we're working with Holtz Leather Company, and they are going to send us some hats that have not yet been released. By the time you hear this, they're probably going to be out. But we are getting the kids version of our hats, and I think everybody who has purchased one of those. But we're going to be doing a giveaway with a couple kids hats combined with an adult hat. So if you guys are interested in getting in on that, we're going to be posting, once those come in, we'll be posting on Instagram and Facebook, and it'll have the directions on how you can get involved.
Because we haven't figured that out yet.
We haven't.
But it's going to be sweet.
It's going to be awesome.
We'll probably have figured out by the time you actually hear this.
Yeah, we're pretty excited. So
they're pretty sweet.
Yeah, so you guys can find us on Instagram, Facebook. We're on Podbean. Really, if you hit Instagram or Facebook, we're going to have a link tree, and that will have everything you need. And then also, we should have giveaway details by the time you hear this, hopefully. And anywhere you want to listen to our episodes will be linked there too.
Sweet.
Awesome. Thanks for tuning in.
Thank you, folks. And
all right.
Peace out.